Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am flying by myself today with a quick episode as Flash, Zach Celedonia, is out on vacation, playing around with Mickey Mouse and Harry Potter, or else he was doing, catching some rays as well. So we'll catch back up with my good pal there and my other co-hosts throughout the week. And next week, of course, it's the month of June, which could only mean one thing. We don't have a whole lot to talk about with football. I mean, at the Stephon Tuitt retirement, we have various many rankings and ratings, just ridiculous things that are floating around, and most of them revolve around who's going to be a starting quarterback where and who's the best of the quarterbacks and all these different things that go out there. And I'm going to be just as guilty as charged today because I have to come up with something to talk about for all of you fine folks, you supporters and listeners and viewers out there. All of you deserve some hashtag good content, hashtag things somewhere around here. I'm not going to go pick it up today, but I thought to myself, there's a lot of people talking about this player, that player, roster positions, that and the other thing. What better way to really get into things before we even get to training camp, but to trim down the roster from about 90-ish to 53. Let's get to it, right? Everybody's like, Steelers, most people still don't realize that Steelers almost always roster 3 quarterbacks every year. Not going to just change out on a whim just because Kenny Pickett got drafted. Oh yeah, Kenny Pickett's going to make the roster. There's no doubt about it. I mean, come on now. I'm not trying to fool anybody here and pull the blinders on, but there's a lot of people who just think because the Steelers drafted 2 quarterbacks that a specific one, cough, Mason Rudolph, isn't going to make the roster this year. And I could only say, I don't know about that. Steelers would have to get something, and I don't know who's trading at this point. I mean, let's think about this. And I don't want to get too in-depth on each of these positions. We've been going through them each week, and quarterback we've been really hammering around and banging the drum on, and I'll have more to say about Rudolph in the future. But if Kenny Pickett fell all the way to pick 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, teams are they looking at quarterbacks? I mean, they're looking at Russell Wilson. Packers were looking to retain Aaron Rodgers. There was a little bit of smoke around some different trades. Of course, Matt Ryan, that's a whole different situation with the Falcons. Gross there. Carson Wentz, a different situation with the Colts, who keep trying to find someone else after Andrew Luck's retirement. I don't know that there's much of a market, but my main prediction, I'm going to stick to it, just because I don't want to talk about quarterbacks too much today or for a while. Although I bet it comes up again later in the week. Should we have 2? Always try and promise 2 shows a week, all of yous, but you know, we're stretching it a little bit here. It's kind of like how many sequels can you make to certain movies? So the Fast franchise, right? Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. Those are your 3. Mind you, I'm going to have 53 at the end of this. I do have a list, and I do have the math all done. So you don't have to look at me crazy unless I made a mistake or an error on my sheet, but I'm pretty sure I did not as I go through all of it. So, and I'm not going to pop this up just on the screen just yet for those of you watching on YouTube because, to be quite frank, I don't want to spoil anything. So I'll bring it up when we got the offense in general almost wrapped up here. But running back should be pretty simple as well. You've got, always think about this. What if the Steelers didn't draft Najee Harris? What would they do for running back? If they didn't take Pat Freiermuth, what would they do at tight end? I still think last year's draft really sets up this year's team really well. Najee Harris, of course, he's the crown jewel of this whole thing. I don't necessarily think, though, that the Steelers are totally out when you're talking about Benny Snell. He does offer some special teams value, if he offers much more than anything else like that. But I think in this scheme, usually the Steelers are keeping 3 running backs and then a fullback, of course. We'll get to Derek Watt here in a second. Anthony McFarland's going to be my 3rd running back. I mean, it could be Trey Edmonds. It could be an impressive Mateo Durant. maybe Jalen Warren, maybe somebody gets cut from another team. Anything's really possible at this point. I mean, Snell's in the last year of his contract. McFarland, I think he's a change of pace back that the Steelers have been trying desperately to fit that round peg in the square hole. Health and other variety of reasons, just the offense stinking, just hasn't really allowed for him to see much playing time or anything. And then, of course, we got to have the unicorn of the group, position all himself. You know, he's not a specialist. He's not a kicker, punter, or long snapper, but he is a specialist. But they have to list him as a fullback. But hey, he's got the highest cap hit of any player on the Steelers offense. It's cap hit. Everybody's like, oh, he's making more money. That's not necessarily true. It has to deal with the way it's dispersed and the way the accounting goes. There's people with longer term contracts than what Derek Watt currently has right now. And a lot of people, a lot of the players on the Steelers, offensive side of the ball in particular, they're all on rookie deals pretty much. Or some of them are entering a second contract. Let's say like a Chooks Okorafor, for example. But his contract is like, they could cut him next year if he doesn't end up playing out to their expectations. There's a lot of like no risk stuff that's going around and funny accounting. That's why I just laugh when people are like, oh, well, Derek Watt's the most. Yeah, well, they don't have a quarterback on their right. They don't have like I should say like the franchise quarterback, right? Because these guys are making like $40 million a year now. That's what Ben 40 last year. I get confused because I know Russell Wilson was on territory too. But Ben was like owed 40, and there was always talk and speculation as to whether or not he would be cut. People were talking about cutting Big Ben last year. I know maybe you don't remember it. We have very short-term memories. And it's always a recency bias too, of course. And that couldn't be any more true when we get to, that'll be 4, by the way. 4 for, I'm going to put Derek Watt in with we'll say 4. 3 running backs and the fullback. Usually about on par. It could be 5, but you'll see where I go to with the tight ends. But before I do, the recency bias that I'm talking about is Deontay Johnson. Is he worth the wide receiver 1 money? More and more I think about it, the more and more that the Steelers have played this sort of offense where it's to throw the ball and gain yards. It's like just short passes and then create something. And he's a guy that creates, but if you could just let him fly too, I think it would be really impressive. I think this is like I don't want to put it up there with the Antonio Brown. I'm not getting the same vibes. Just stop with the drop issue stuff too. I mean, Antonio Brown, I saw becoming a star. I get those vibes with Deontay Johnson. Not as strong just yet, but it's there. It's in the mix. He has been nothing but solid. I think he's a guy when you're not paying very many other people on the offense right now. You got some offensive line contracts that next year really kick into high gear, like the core 4, James Daniels. Okay, that sort of stuff's going to happen. Probably end up paying a wide receiver. You could afford a wide receiver at this point. Just depends on which one you want to be able to afford. Of course, Chase Claypool's still going to be in this mix as well. Got a couple of the rookies that are going to be on here too. Of course, the Steelers drafting George Pickens in the 2nd round. Calvin Austin III out of Memphis will also be in this mix as well. And now it's just a question as to whether or not the Steelers have 5 or 6 wide receivers. And we've seen in the past that they've kept 6 where necessary. Never going to get used to seeing Calvin Austin wearing number 19, by the way. That's just a little bizarre for me. A little too soon when you're talking about recent events, right? Current events. Also, what's up with everybody in the teens and stuff? I think you get some single digits too, but 89, Gunnar Olszewski. That one's going to throw you for a loop when you see it out there. And it's going to be on the special team side of the ball too. And they brought him in to be a returner, unless he really stinks up the joint for some unknown reason. He's got to be at least the 5th wide receiver. You got to remember that some of these positions that are here, you're not throwing quarterbacks out there to play special teams. You need some players on the 53 and players that are active on game day. You're going to have like a handful of inactives as well. You're going to need some of these folks to be able to play on special teams. There's some spots there, but I do think I don't have that really, really crazy photo of him right in the mix, though. Maybe I got to say some in the mix kind of guys. Anthony Miller, maybe in the mix. But I think Miles Boykin's going to edge him out just because he's a larger body and he's a waiver claim type of player. He's got to pass through waivers. Whereas I believe Anthony Miller at this point, is vested veteran. So you're at a point where he just ends up getting released. It pretty much could be like a free agent, and instead of having to go through the waiver claim process. I got to bone up on that. I got to look at his contract and his years served in the NFL to see what's true of that. But that's kind of like how it works on the rookie contracts. And Boykin is still, since he was claimed off waivers by the Steelers, is still subject to the original rookie deal. The Steelers took that on from when he was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. That's why I believe they need a veteran player in too. So when we're talking about the wide receivers, whether this group has been better or worse than last season, I don't know if you start the season with George Pickens and Kelvin Austin having a plethora of snaps and multiple receiver sets. I think you're probably going to see Boykin come out there. You're going to need Boykin as maybe one of those more body guys if Chase Claypool doesn't have it all up here. And the more I look at Chase Claypool and I look at his statistics over the last 2 years, and we talked about it, the catches and the yards are all about the same. And everybody talks about sophomore slumps, and it's like he had like I just broke it down on the website too. What was it? The Seattle Seahawks Sunday Night Football game where he committed a couple of penalties, only had like 2 catches for 6 yards. But then again, nobody was doing much of anything for the Steelers offense that particular evening. So again, it's the recency bias. It's what you have embedded in your brain, and as to whether or not this player has a sophomore slump, whether they can bounce back, it was the touchdowns. The Steelers just, I don't know if it's Ben Roethlisberger problem, a Matt Canada problem, the offensive line problem. Let's see what happens here in year 2 with a lot of those variety of factors and or new quarterback, and see how that might change. But just to look at the first few position groups, got 6 wide receivers making this team, 5 of them that could see some PT early on. Boykin's a player that could probably go inactive or even be cut if he does end up not being great or fantastic. Don't forget, I said Anthony Miller's still hanging around, Cody White. Those will probably be guys that are on the practice squad. You got your 3 quarterbacks at the top. Definitely Mason Rudolph. I've been in this camp for a while that Mason Rudolph he's going to be competing to be the starter with Trubisky. One or the other will be the starter or the backup. Not going to get too much more in depth with that. We've got a show that, thank you, a lot of you have watched and listened to and commented on, and almost got to like shut off comments there. Some people getting nasty. But the 4 running backs, hey, Kenny Pickett, I like the idea of, by the way, Kenny Pickett and rookie quarterbacks kind of sitting. But if he just blows everybody out of the water, Trubisky or Rudolph could be cut very easily. And I say either one. I know everybody just thinks, oh, Trubisky. Don't forget, this is now his 3rd team. Okay? His 3rd team. So there might be something funny going on there. It's not like he signed for a lot of money with the Steelers. I know the Bills, they had the money. They gave it all to Von Miller, right? The 6 wide receivers, like I said, 1 is a specialist. We're going to get into tight ends that you can see sneaking in at the bottom of that list there. But that gets you to, let me see, 3, 4, and 6. If my math's correct, that's about 13 players so far. So we got at least 40 more to go here. And, of course, we get into the tight ends, and like I said just a few moments ago, Pat Freiermuth, what on earth are you going to do if he's not the guy, right? If the Steelers don't draft him, I think they're in a boatload of trouble this year. It was one of those things I was talking about with the Tannenbaum and Banner rankings, and I'm going to get back into with Flash because I know he's going to be feisty. He's going to be raring to go and want to talk about that. But we want to talk about tight ends. I want to talk about some of your studs and players that could really break out in year 2. Pat Freiermuth is definitely one of those dudes. You know, his numbers were kind of somewhat pedestrian last year, but you got to remember, in the grand scheme of things, tight end numbers are pedestrian. For those of you who play fantasy football, you already know that. It's not always, you're not always going to have a touchdown every week. You're not going to have like always 100 receptions. There's only a few tight ends, when healthy, that put up massive numbers, like Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews. So Freiermuth, though, 60 receptions as a rookie, 497 yards. He did have 7 touchdowns. Second most on the team. Deontay Johnson, the only one who had one more to be exact, with 8. But Claypool had 860 yards, second leading receiver, and then Freiermuth 3rd, and then 4th, Najee Harris. So you're spreading the ball around, giving it some love. Got a couple of other players to mention. Of course, Zach Gentry, Kevin Rader, some of the guys that have already been on the roster for a minute or two. And we're going to see who's going to make this roster. But to be completely honest with everyone here, even though I'm a big stan for Kevin Rader, one of my alma mater guys, true underdog, good special teams player, solid blocker at tight end 3. They just brought in Cam Hayward's little brother, and he's going to be one of those hybrid H-backs like we're used to seeing when you're talking about David Johnson, Will Johnson, some of the players that they've had in the past. I think he's going to offer some more variety to maybe Matt Canada's offense. They're going to see where he could fit in over the course of the season. It's probably going to make Rader expendable. I don't see them keeping 4 tight ends, so to speak. But Rader's also a guy, I believe, with the way that the practice squads have been manipulated over the last few seasons. I think he's a guy that could probably be stowed back on the practice squad. It seems like all the eligibility when it comes to veterans, everything like that, they changed a little bit. I believe injured reserve, they added an extra week it out now, and it's a 17-game schedule, so it kind of makes a little more sense. But there's a set number that you could call back, I believe, as well. But for the most part, most of the rules with the practice squad and injured reserve have largely remained the same from the last 2 seasons with a lot of the pandemic changes. And I believe it was 16 players on the practice squad, which is good. It still gives an opportunity to keep players like some of the players I'd already mentioned. I didn't really mention Trey Evans, but he's been floating around there for the longest time. I still gets a paycheck and wears the Steelers jersey, so that's pretty cool in my book. Anthony Miller, Kevin Rader. We're going to talk about this a little bit with the offensive line as well. This is the one I really struggled, and this is like you got to make space in different places for different players, right? And different positions. And when I get to the defense, it's going to be very evident because I'm like, you can't have just all these players on offense and not enough players on defense, and there's just like a bottleneck of where you keep people in certain positions in offense. Like I always get stuck on this each year. I'm like, do they keep 8? Do they keep 9? Where's Kendrick Green play? Perhaps center where he's still listed. Says he's feeling a little more natural at left guard for an recent interview. That might not sit well with big old number 69 Kevin Dotson, who's already in that position as well. But I got a handful of players that I believe are going to make this roster. I think I said maybe Dan Moore Jr., Kevin Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels obviously came in, Shawarma, Core 4. And I have my reserves as Kendrick Green, J.C. Hassenauer, and who's my other one here? Oh, Joe Haig, who I just showed just a second ago here. So, Duke's Core 4, starting tackles with more. It is more of a problem of, I'm like, where do I put Chaz Green on this entire list? Steelers brought him back. I'm not overly impressed with him. And with Kendrick Green and J.C. Hassenauer, and like, what do you do with like a John LeGlue, like some of these guys? You've got multiple guard center types, but they don't have any like maybe defined tackles. And Chaz Green is more of a defined tackle. I think you just got to roll with simply Joe Haig, and he's going to be your swing tackle out there. So on my offensive line, I'm going to be keeping 8 total players. So I started to mention Moore in a Core 4, Mason Cole, Kevin Dotson, James Daniels. Right now, that's kind of penciled in as the OTA starters in air quotes. We don't know what's going to happen with camp. And then my reserves would be, based on that, Kendrick Green, who could be starting. You never know. J.C. Hassenauer and Joe Haig. At least gives you 2 interior linemen and then 1 tackle. They could add to this. And that's a matter of what do they do now that they keep wide receivers. If they add to this group, maybe somebody gets cut from another team and they add a tackle. I think they are hurting most at tackle depth right now. And is John LeGlue going to play tackle if necessary to throw him out there? Strange things have happened. Seen it happen before. Chris Hubbard. But then again, when you have somebody that's of the caliber of Mike Munchak, I don't always try and hang my hat on the offensive line's been trashed since Munchak left. Run game not as good. Munchak left. I don't hang my hat on that, so to speak. But he did get a lot out of the players that he had, and a lot of those guys were late round picks and undrafted. So 8 offensive linemen are in the total mix here. Pull the whole thing up on screen. just so we could see it, and just pop through it just one more time here. Looking also, the tight ends are still listed in the bottom end of the wide receiver. So you got 3 tight ends. That gets up to like 16, and then 24 on offense. If you doubled that up and it was 48, and you got 3 specialists. So you see where I'm getting at with the balance between offense and defense when you're trying to add up and get to 53. So let's go to that defense. Let's see. Grown ass man, Cam Hayward, definitely. Some people actually took offense that, he's saying it should be like him and Aaron Donald, then everybody else, not just Aaron Donald and everyone else. I have to agree. Aaron Donald's not out there in the NFL. Aaron Donald is just so freaking dominant that he like overshadows everybody else's content. Cam Hayward really should be in this mix as well. I wonder if he's jealous of his baby brother's hair, by the way. I know I am. Got a lot more of it. I wish I had some of that. But obviously, there's a whole left here with Stephon Tuitt. I struggle with the defensive line. I'm like, how many defensive linemen you need? Special teams. Really depends on a lot that it depends on getting there. We're going to have the return of Tyson Alualu and Chris Wormley. Chris Wormley played very well, I believe, instead of both Tuitt and Tyson Alualu as they were out last season. Got to help him. But when he's healthy, he's been doing well. He's been improving as time goes on. So I feel comfortable there. He's definitely going to be somebody that's probably a lock to make this roster. I hate using the word lock because it's not always a given. We'll see Tyson Alualu come back, hopefully be the force that he was just the year or the season before. Not getting any younger, but defensive linemen, they tend to do this thing. They hang around almost as long as the kickers do. You've got some players that were also added to the roster just last year, such as Isaiah Loudermilk, playing right alongside, almost looking in some ways like a miniature, or not a miniature, but like almost like a younger clone, maybe. It's hard to say, a clone of Cam Hayward, especially when I'm talking about how good he is. I don't want to prop up Isaiah Loudermilk to that sort of level, but just looking at him in his physical makeup, it's hard to even say that because now you have Connor Hayward on the roster too, so it makes it a little difficult to say, oh yeah, well he's a clone, and it's like, well no, really, if there was a younger version, here he is, and he happens to play on the offense, which is kind of funny in and of itself. We talked a lot about the Steelers' 3rd round pick, Marvin Leal, and he's going to put on a little bit more weight. He's already got the other size and the height. He's got the frame for this. Let's see if he continues to add these moves. He's got just natural instincts and playing ability from the college level. If they translate to the pros, Steelers may have had themselves another steal, another mid-round guy who may be a major contributor for the next few years to come. That could never hurt, especially when they're on the 4-year rookie contracts. Going to help that salary cap where other teams are blowing money for players who don't even know if they're going to play this year. I'll just leave it at that. I got to throw my shade where necessary, but where does it leave some of the other players, some of the ones that have been hanging around for a while? Henry Mondow, talked about him just a tiny bit last week with me and Brian on the later part of the week episode. We talked about the defensive line and the impact of losing Stephon Tuitt. That out if you happen to miss it. I don't know. He just always seems to be the guy that's like the practice squad guy, and he could fill in here or there. But if you have a chance to upgrade, you're going to upgrade. You're going to stick with. And I think at this point, somebody that's more of a tackle type. I mean, you could play Wormley there, but that's assuming you're going to have Loudermilk or Leal playing in that spot. And I think that's where Montravius Adams nags a roster spot here. So 6 defensive linemen, could easily be 7. I know Carlos Davis, another one that you could toss in that mix, is in contention. You know what I mean? So we'll see. Again, this is never easy to do, even when you're making these guesses. It's probably even harder for the new GM, Omar Khan, and his assistants come up with some of these things. Linebackers. Let's start with some outside linebackers. This man needs no introduction. TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year, reigning Defensive Player of the Year. God, it feels good to say that. Probably feel better, though. He'd probably feel better with some other hardware in the cabinet. I would, too. Not going to lie. You've got another young man. I was just talking about this, too. Coming out party against the Seattle Seahawks. had what, 4 quarterback hits. Which, by the way, as I was looking back on that, we always forget about some of these last two possessions. The two possessions that the Seahawks and Geno Smith had in that overtime period, strip sack fumbles by T.J. Watt, just ridiculous. He said, "Screw this," and the referees almost did. If you remember all that, the bobbled ball out of bounds, and I was rewatching this, and I was just like, man, I no wonder like I have health conditions. I really don't, but the Steelers give me some health conditions. Derek Tuska, they need some depth. He'll be there. I'm not going to necessarily say his roster spot is safe. Probably far from it. He's probably one of the bottom rung players. When you're one of the guys at the lower end of the spectrum here, you're always fighting for your job. It's going to be interesting to see what they also do with Jannard Avery, who I have also making the roster. He's going to be one of their edge rushers as well. We'll see. Steelers can always be adding to this mix. Remember, it's depth. I know Tuzar Skipper was just signed. Please stop. He has it. Unless he turns into James Harrison. It very well could be. James Harrison was cut how many times, and eventually does make it. But it's just so tough. Like, just watching him. He's bouncing around, and he's still got a shot in the league. And that's all you could say. You give him a chance. You're saying there's a chance. Let's give this guy a chance, too. Devin Bush. I saw some love for him out there, and gentleman that tweeted it out video was just like, oh, this is just one play. You want to hang your hat on one play. But yeah, pre-injury Devin Bush. I don't think anyone was arguing as to whether or not he was a draft bust. Post-injury Devin Bush, yeah. Got some recovery to do. Let's see what he does with a full offseason at 100%. If he ends up turning things around. If he does with Miles Jack, holy crap, that's going to be nice. Robert Spillane, who Merrill Hodge, for some reason, thinks is the Steelers' best inside linebacker. I think Merrill forgot about free agency. I think he forgot about Miles Jack. I think he just meant it because he liked the thumper thing. He likes the old school type players. Side to sideline, Billy here. Hey, you still got to love him. He hits like a freight train. It's definitely Steelers-esque. But come on. Even as an athlete, I'm not going to go out of my way to say that Robert Spillane is 100% the guy. You got a bunch of other linebackers, like a glut of them. What do the Steelers do with these guys? You've got a draft pick in Mark Robinson, who played 1 year college at the position. You've also got Ulysses Gilbert. You've got Buddy Johnson. You've got Marcus Allen. There's like a whole bunch other inside linebackers. I'm like, do they keep 5 inside linebackers? And with the injuries that they've had over the years, I could see it happening. So right now, as difficult as it seems, and trying to come up with these types of predictions, I've got the Steelers sitting, this is pretty nice, at 6 defensive linemen and the 9 linebackers. Nice, right? 4 outside linebackers, 5 inside linebackers. So I don't know. That's where it makes it tough. I mean, I just the thing I have the most problem with. And why did I go Buddy Johnson? Because Ulysses Gilbert's been there long enough, had injury history. I think he's on the shortest leash, especially when they brought in Mark Robinson. I think Mark Robinson, having been only like a 1-year player at the position in college, like he might be the most expendable and somebody that's a catch release. He's also the 6th round pick. The 6th round picks with the Steelers, it just seems like they've been throwaways. I hate saying anything like that about any individual player, but when you're just talking about spots and you're talking about the business of football and molding and shaping these rosters, I mean, it is what it is. Buddy Johnson just had 1 year in the system. Marcus Allen was signed, brought back, but he's far from safe also. Somewhere in this mix, you've got like 4 players probably vying for what could be 1 or 2 positions total. It all depends on how many defensive backs they end up carrying. On the cornerback side of things, you've got, I think I pulled an image from my boy Cam Sutton. That's all I was talking about last season was in free agency, you had to sign Cam Sutton. And this year I said, got to be Ahkello Witherspoon. So those are probably your 2 starters fighting along with Levi Wallace, who's brought over from the Buffalo Bills. You got 3 solid corners in your rotation there for the Steelers. And of course, Sutton slides around and does all kind of things, as does Arthur Millette. kind of more of a dime backer. He plays some nickel. He's formerly a safety when he was playing with the Jets. So he could be, he's going to make the roster, I believe. He's going to be fighting there. Now, who do you keep beyond that? James Pierre. I thought James Pierre was just not going to be the guy. I think that window is closed. He's got to camp to show some things. He did redeem himself in some situations last year with some splash plays, but it was more than that I think maybe hurts his chances. The Steelers may still hold on to Justin Lane, but I don't think his spot is anywhere near as safe either. And then you've just got a bunch of like random names that are tossed out there. So while they usually keep 5 corners, it's tough to say at the bottom of this list. They only have like 3 that are definites that are going to be there. Although I do think Millette is a fit, so I'm not going to disparage him just too much. But Justin Lane just hasn't been able to get on the field very much, and the clock's ticking. That rookie contract is just about up. Special teams, I'm not sure. Does he offer enough over a younger body or someone else, maybe even a veteran player that they could put out there? Really difficult for me to say. I don't know offhand. I wish I could tell you, but as far as the safety position, we're looking at probably another big contract on the defense now. They've been able to roll with some rookie contracts on that side of the ball. They finally paid TJ last year. Now they're going to pay Minkah Fitzpatrick. That's the next one. And this is tough because there's a lot of safeties, but how many are going to be playing some sort of hybrid roles? You got to be able to cover the receivers that the Bengals have. Don't have to cover the receivers that Ravens have, but you do have to cover their tight ends somehow. So you need somebody with a little more size. Terrell Edmonds, he comes back. Not the largest deal, 1 year, kind of prove it. But they upgrade, obviously. I still like him. Still think that if he shows that he has the goods, they get something a little more long-term or concrete. But it's never a sure thing in the not-for-long league. There's a guy that I had a hard time trying to figure out as well. Trey Norwood, 7th-round pick, Swiss Army knife, got some major playing time last year. But I have him almost at the bottom of my list. Now, let me explain why. Because you've got some other players that are out there like Miles Killebrew, for example. What do you do with Miles Killebrew now in this particular situation? Another guy that they re-signed. It's like, hey, you can't keep them all. You can't bring them all back. But that's almost kind of like what they did. And they also brought back Carl Joseph as well. So I have 6 safeties that I think could make this roster. And just because I might be playing like these sort of hybrid type of situational roles, much like a Millette. Although I think Carl Joseph, I mean, it seems like he wasn't like a very hot commodity for anybody else. He was a practice squad player for the Steelers last year, for the most part. Got called up, I think, for 1 game. And then after that, it didn't have a free agent market. They still brought him back, but they got DeMonte Casey, Miles Killebrew, Trey Norwood. Got a lot of guys that are backups. So I think, Edmonds is your starter for sure. They have 11 DBs. They've kept 6 corners before. Lots of linebackers. So something's got to give here where I think Marcus Allen was converted from safety to inside linebacker. Somebody probably loses a spot here, maybe for an additional defensive lineman. I think you just need that extra body like a Carlos Davis or Landau just for your kick and punt coverage. Got to have some guys, some of those big bodies up front on special teams. And speaking of special teams, should be pretty much the way it works. Chris Boswell, Presley Harvin III, and Christian Kuntz, the specialists. So when you end up rounding out the remainder of way too early predictions here, just the way it kind of shakes out on the bottom half of all of this. And I've got, 5 corners. I've got 6 safeties. And then, of course, the 3 specialists. And that gets us all the way to 53, unless I had a typo somewhere, which I didn't. But I know, I double-checked this. I tried to proof it. Somebody's going to find something wrong anyways. Maybe I misspelled someone's name. Hopefully the copy-paste job went all right coming up with the Steelers.com roster. But there you have it, folks. There's my 53. There's a little bit of logic thrown in there. As you can see, though, it's pretty easy to just kind of pencil in some of the names. It wasn't as easy on defense. And I think someone may agree with me here that when you just have a bunch of names, it's not necessarily, shouldn't sit right. You know what I mean? And you got Minkah, You got Terrell Edmonds. So you've got your starters. It's more or less the depth players that I think is more of the trouble in sorting this out. The backup inside linebackers, for example. This seems like there's a whole bunch of them. And I think that's just over several years of trying to find the Ryan Shazier fit or replacement. And then also losing Devin Bush. Don't forget they brought in Avery Williamson on a trade, trying to do that too, trying to get things to work. Mark Barron. So the Steelers have been looking. But the thing that makes the defense hum is always going to be the linebacker. I understand you got Terrell Austin, Mike Tomlin, got this new type of NFL pass happy, not necessarily new, but you got to have enough defensive backs. You got to have people that can cover tight ends. You got to be able to play within your own division. You got to be able to cover David Njoku. Oh, I was laughing there. Anyways, yeah, I'm more worried with Mark Andrews, and the Steelers did all right covering him. But then again, when you have Tyler Huntley playing quarterback, there are still some that are out there that were like, hey, sign that guy. He's better than everybody else. Stop it. Actually, I had to tell somebody this in the Facebook groups too, and it'll be one of my closing thoughts. They were like, oh, just give Mason Rudolph over to the Cleveland Browns, because you're talking about, like a potential Watson suspension and maybe Mayfield doesn't play. Well, why would you help the Cleveland Browns? Like, I think they're thinking as a joke that in their head, Mason is just so bad, you give him to the Browns. I think he would actually do all right. Probably better than what they have currently. That's just my random thought, because we're going to be talking about some of the other teams in the AFC North coming ahead and getting some pre-camp looks as we get later into this month, a little bit deeper. Maybe we'll have some more news on those type of fronts and see if there's any suspensions or who might be playing. A little bit scarier of a situation, I think, than, if Watson plays, then it's not a scary situation for Browns, but fans got to be looking on and saying, man, if this dude doesn't play, what the heck? Because Mayfield's still there, but for all intents and purposes, I don't think he's just going to sit and collect a check. He has no reason really to go out there. He can give a big middle finger to everybody, but they already did it to him. So really, I don't know. But I wouldn't be giving Mason Rudolph to anyone in the division to help them out. That's very well. That's actually a good point. If he were cut, though, I do think someone in the division does pick him up. There's some food for thought. It's one of those things like we always say, but in reverse. One of those players that you've seen enough of. You've seen some of the preseason film, and when you're playing early, like in the season now, what did the Bengals got to go on in that week one? You could look at some of the schemes and things. You have some familiarity of opponent from the year before, but in other ways you don't, especially since the Steelers will have a new quarterback. You're going to be watching preseason film. And I think they would pick up Mason Rudolph and have him as a backup. Joe Burrow. Why not? Everybody would laugh at that, but seriously, Rudolph could play another 5 years in the league easily and be a backup bouncing around and collecting checks. Brian Hoyer's done it. Brian Hoyer is definitely not a top-notch quarterback by any means. I used to really like Hoyer, and I was pulling for him at one point to maybe be good and turn it around and everything like that, and it never ended up working out for him. But that's the way I could see career trajectories happening, particularly if you have that level of inconsistent or bad experience. Which, again, I didn't want to get into quarterbacks again, but I did it anyways. Oh, well. There's my 53-man roster. I'm looking forward to your comments. Send them along. You can always tweet them, too. Tag us, tag me. My handle's right here. If you're watching the video, Joe_Kuzma on Twitter. Steel City _ at Twitter as well, because they just don't let you have enough letters and numbers in order to do that. So you could always send them over that way too. We get them that way too. And eventually, we got some things to talk about, or if you have some things you want us to talk about, by all means, pick our brain, ask us some questions, try and get it here on the show, as we've got a, hate to say slow month of June, but hopefully we'll continue bringing you some good content and entertaining you as we move forward and plow through this. Until next time, my name is Joe Kuzma, and that's it. It's only me today. So hopefully everyone else, actually, I'll be going on vacation, hopefully shortly soon as well. So you'll probably be missing me while I'm gone, and maybe we can get Brian to do one of these solo, and got to have him hold down the fort, which is scary. So until next time, we encourage everyone out there, as always, to be safe, be good. We'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.